it is time to read some Child Bride. So y'all have to let me know if you want me to continue pointing the phone to book. I will do that. I got no problem. There's just been a few people that kind of requested to kind of change it to read it. So we'll see how this works, and if we need to go back to the other way, I got no problem doing that. Of course, I'll also take a look at how many views the video has, because YouTube has something that they like as well. You know, I mean, they say you can't please everybody all the time, or some of the people, most of the time, I don't really know what the phrase is, messing up here. But hopefully you enjoyed the video earlier on. Are you learning from tonight? My Army Days with Elvis. The last chapter we read was two-timing Elvis. So we're going to continue to roll back here, and then we're going to talk about illusions. Hold on one second here. Nope, it's family skeletons. That's the chapter we're on. Okay, so make sure you like it, hit all notifications. Thanks to CC Cat for leaving me a little thanks. I guess CC Cat left instructions on how to do it. Anyhow, let's go here. All right, the weekend after the dormitory affair was Easter. 2 weeks had passed since Gene Wagner had received the letter from his mother, inviting him to travel to Wiesbaden in search of their long-lost Priscilla. He had seen the pictures of Elvis's girlfriend in German newspapers, but I didn't know that Priscilla was that Priscilla. That Priscilla Boyu, or Babalu, or Boyalu, boil on my behind, was Priscilla Wagner. Gene checked into the Von Steuben Hotel, looked up the Boyu's telephone number, and called their house. He eventually found Anne at home and confirmed that she was his former sister-in-law. Anne said, "Come on over." That's what he recalled. She seemed pleased to hear from him. I was excited about seeing Anne because she's been a big thing in my life. I couldn't imagine how Priscilla looked. I had no idea how tall, how big, or what she looked like. The timing for Anne was fortuitous because Paul Beaulieu was out of town. Only she and Priscilla were at home when the visitor arrived. Gene Wagner, a shy, sensitive teacher, had no idea why his family had been kept from Priscilla for the past 11 years, or why her name had been changed to Beaulieu, Babalu, boil on my rear. And he did not, okay, I'll stop making jokes. And he did not wish to make trouble for his late brother's wife. So he stood in front of his only niece, whom he had not seen since she was 3, uncertain what to do. Well, I didn't know if Priscilla knew who I was. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to embarrass Anne. I didn't want to say, "Hey, I'm your dad's brother." I didn't know if Anne had even told her. I just said, "Hello, how are you?" The circumstances were made equally awkward for Priscilla. "Well, my mother said that my Uncle Gene was going to be coming by," she said later. It was the first time Priscilla had heard that her real father even had a brother, that she had an uncle and a grandmother she never knew about. But I was very contained. See, there was only so much I felt comfortable with because I knew my mother was uncomfortable. So I didn't really ask a lot of questions. I didn't really go into anything. I mean, he was a stranger to me. Anne and Gene had a nice visit by his description, laughing and reminiscing about Jimmy and old times. In fact, she mentioned things that I had completely forgotten when she stayed with us for those couple months after my brother was killed. Anne also presented a considerable sanitized version of Priscilla's relationship with Elvis for the Wagners, reassuring Gene that the press accounts of a romance between Elvis and Jimmy's 14-year-old daughter were not true. They were exaggerated. Elvis was not taking her out. They were not spending all night and all that. Anne stressed that school came first. Well, Gene had made hotel arrangements for the week, hoping he would find his niece and they would get reacquainted. When he returned to the Beaulieus a day later, however, the atmosphere was tense. Paul was back in town, and Priscilla's 2 half-brothers and her half-sister were at home. Anne took him aside, Gene remembered, and asked him sotto voce, S-O-T-T-O-V-O-C-E, I think it's sotto voce, if he would pretend he was just a friend and not Priscilla's uncle, because the other children did not know who her real father was, and Anne didn't want to have to explain to them that she was married before, though Priscilla knew. "So I visited as a friend of the family," recalled Gene. She was concerned because the other kids were going to be there, declared Priscilla, and here was this stranger. I think my mother talked to Jean and asked him, please, not to say anything to my father. Well, Paul Beaulieu came home shortly after Jean arrived, making this situation even more tense. When Anne introduced me to Beaulieu, he left immediately, recalled Jean. I sort of felt that he was a little uptight that I had shown up. He left the room, and I didn't see him again. In fact, I don't even remember if he shook my hand. He hardly acknowledged me. He was very cool and didn't say anything. Jean sensed the antagonism. Well, there was something, as he put it later on. I sort of felt maybe that I shouldn't have shown up unexpected. Maybe that was the problem. Jean took photographs of Priscilla for Catherine Wagner, who was waiting anxiously back in Pennsylvania. She posed prettily, first alone, then with her mother and siblings. Anne was no longer the Rooney whom Jimmy's mother had known. Her face had grown hard with the passing years. She still tried to protect an aura of glamour, however, and her figure was pencil slim, despite her 4 children. So she posed model style with one high-heeled foot in front of the other. Priscilla's anxiety was nowhere apparent in the pictures. She was costume neat in a blue hoop skirt with a sweater draped over her shoulders. She was smiling like the girl who got Elvis, and she was. Jean Wagner handed out gifts to all the children and left shortly afterwards, without so much as a single conversation alone with his niece. I think he brought me something, affirmed Priscilla. I just know it was very uncomfortable. It was a very uncomfortable feeling in a very uncomfortable situation. And I know my mother was extremely uncomfortable. He didn't stay very long. That's just messy, isn't it? Jean wrote his mother in Titusville and broke the news that her missing granddaughter had been found, enclosing the snapshots he had taken. Catherine Wagner was ecstatic. She wrote Anne a 14-page letter expressing how thrilled she was to have found her and Priscilla again, bringing her up to date. Not a word was mentioned about the 11 years that she had missed of her only grandchild's life. That's very big of Catherine. She sent the letter in care of Paul Beaulieu, whatever, at his military address in Wiesbaden, and waited once more, this time with joy, for a letter or phone call from Anne or Priscilla. None ever came. Days passed, then weeks, then finally months. Catherine Wagner concluded that Paul had gotten the letter and never passed it on to Anne or Priscilla. It was he, her woman's intuition told her, who kept them apart all these years. I know it as if I'd read it someplace or somebody had told me, she later remarked. Everything was perfectly all right till she married that person. It was just through him that Anne wouldn't share Priscilla with us after he was married. He just didn't want to do that. I know Anne would listen. Whatever he would say, she would do. Miss Wagner just could not figure out why. Perhaps, she conjectured, Beaulieu, as she pronounced Paul's surname, bore a grudge against the Wagners because they were German Protestants, and he was a French Catholic. She was grasping at straws. Jean Wagner would barely acknowledge later how hurt he was by the slight. I kept it hidden, my feelings. He was also at a loss to understand why Anne excommunicated them. A female friend of his stumbled upon the reason Anne's cousins... A female friend of his stumbled upon the reason Anne Margaret's cousin... Oh my goodness. Sorry, folks. Let's try this one more time. A female friend of his stumbled upon the reason Anne's cousin Margaret had revealed. I had a close girlfriend, Connie, said Jean, who told me she read someplace that the second husband can be very, very jealous of a first husband and insecure. She said maybe he was jealous of Jim. Obviously jealous of Jim. Paul was such a little man when it came to that. Now, once again, I mean, geez. This poor family, they lost their son, they lost their brother, they lost the granddaughter, the niece. It's cruel. It's cruel. It's very tiny. They were very tiny people. Anne and Paul. Very tiny, in my opinion. You don't do that unless you're tiny. You know. Anyhow. Maybe Anne was afraid of him, Catherine Wagner speculated. I can't fathom it. I can't solve it. So I just forgot about it. Well, Miss Wagner decided to do nothing further. "I always look at it this way," she said in the 70s. "It's the way God wanted it to be. My heart was broken for a long, long time. But I'd think, well, if that's the way she wants it, that's the way it'll be." At least she had photographs of Priscilla, looking so much like Jim. And she knew her granddaughter was alive and well and dating Elvis Presley. Priscilla never knew that her grandmother had sent her a letter that spring, expressing her constant love, anxious to re-enter her life. She never saw it. Whether Anne did was another of Anna Iverson Wagner Ballou closely held secrets. Anne Ballou encountered a ghost from her past that April. In June, Priscilla nearly faced a ghost of her own. Pam Rutherford and her family, who were stationed in England, made plans to stop in Wiesbaden for a few days over the summer holiday. Well, Pam wrote to Linda Williams in advance to arrange to spend time with both her and Priscilla, with whom she had not seen in 2 years. That's the girl I think that Priscilla was playing What If with all those years. The famed photograph of Priscilla waving goodbye to Elvis had even made the British newspapers, and Pam had clipped it out in disbelief, stunned that her former best friend had realized her fantasy about Elvis from their games of Imagine If in Texas. Well, when the Rutherfords arrived in Germany, Priscilla met Linda as planned, but when she got to the Beaulieu's at the arranged time, Priscilla was nowhere around. So Pam met Linda, and then Priscilla was nowhere around. Pam waited and waited for her childhood friend, but Priscilla never appeared. Quite the girl that Priscilla is, right? Pam left Wiesbaden feeling snubbed and wrote Carol Ann how hurt she was. "I don't remember what the problem was," Linda said diplomatically. In retrospect, Priscilla's motivation is clear. She couldn't see Pam Rutherford now, for Pam was the keeper of one of Priscilla's secrets. She knew that Priscilla was a longtime Elvis Presley fan, and that she'd hoped fervently for 3 years that she would one day meet Elvis, date Elvis, and voila, marry Elvis. And of course, that's not the story she spun all these years, right? She wasn't an Elvis fan. She didn't care about him at all. And, all right, so let's continue here. The Babalus moved soon after Pam's visit. The summer between Priscilla's freshman and sophomore years, base housing became available, enabling them to leave their flat in downtown Wiesbaden for more spacious officers' quarters in Ockham, adjacent to the school. H. Arnold was situated picturesquely on one of the numerous hills above Wiesbaden, with military housing extending from its grounds like spokes on a wheel. After a brief stay in a smaller apartment, the Babalus took up residence. I need to just call them the Bees. How's that? Since Prissy B should lose the Presley name. The Bees took up residence on the 3rd floor of the 3rd-story building on Westphalenstrasse. Each floor contained 2 apartments with maids' quarters in the basement. Now that Priscilla was no longer physically isolated downtown and emotionally distanced by Elvis's presence, she spent more time with Al Corey and her first real girlfriend, Debbie Ross, whose family lived across the hall from the Bees. Debbie was Priscilla's physical and intellectual opposite, a cute, bookish, blonde cheerleader, which may have drawn Priscilla to her, because there was no competition. I guess I was somewhat in awe of Priscilla, but I knew that I had things she needed in terms of just being a friend. I was one of the few girlfriends she had there. Debbie ate dinner with the Bees, spent the night in their apartment, listened to records, and occasionally helped Priscilla with her homework. The Elvis part of Priscilla's life, Debbie recalled, was all sort of mysterious. Marianne Barks, who was in Debbie's clique, remembered spending the night at Priscilla's with Debbie when Elvis called. I thought, oh my God, Elvis is on the phone. At that time, calling the States was like calling the moon. You had to practically put a phone call in and wait a day to get a phone call back. And there would be crackling and God knows what and how much it would cost. You'd only call back to the States if somebody was dying or if you had to get some emergency information. And he was just calling her. Marianne knew Priscilla had gone to the airport to see Elvis off, and she'd heard the rumors, but still wasn't sure whether to believe them. I just remember going into her room and seeing Elvis's combat jacket on the wall. That stands out. She nailed it up on her bedroom. I guess that's That's pretty cool. Pretty cool to have. I mean, most people would, wouldn't they? And I'm going, oh my God, this is for real. Priscilla was in a strange twilight zone, receiving sporadic but heart-stopping phone calls from Elvis, preserving a shrine to him in her bedroom, yet he was, to her, a chimera, a fantastical object of her youthful fancy. Interestingly, that was how her female classmates saw Priscilla. Because of her contact with Elvis, it was just like she was an untouchable category, explained Debbie. Not approachable, too pretty, too unreal, not a part of us. Debbie was Priscilla's best friend at that time, but they were not what Debbie considered close. I didn't really get involved or ask a lot of questions about her relationship with Elvis, Debbie said in later years. I was interested in her as my friend, not as a way to get anything, and maybe that's why we could be friends. But did they stay friends? I'd like to know that. Priscilla did show Debbie her treasure box, however, and lamented how difficult it was to get letters to Elvis. That she had to send them through Joe Esposito on a special pink stationery, though Joe would not remember a color code. She did show me some things that Elvis had sent her, or given her, Debbie recalled. She used to bring her album thing that he'd given her over the house. I think I had a better stereo or something, and we'd sit there and listen to him. Debbie remembered that Priscilla became extremely upset when Debbie scratched one of her Elvis records. Elvis shipped Priscilla other albums in '45 from the States, songs that identified with our relationship, Priscilla recalled. Sealed with a Kiss was one. Hey, Hey, Paula, Will You Marry Me One Day? Elvis also sent Priscilla a copy of Goodnight, My Love, the song that signed off the broadcast they listened to in his bedroom. So many reminders, as she put it. Debbie felt from her conversations with Priscilla then that she had a love for Elvis, but more significantly that there seemed to be some security there, or something she knew there. Priscilla began her sophomore year continuing her double life, deeply involved with Tommy. In a fantasy romance with Elvis, who still believed he was the only one. She made another girlfriend, an 8th grade girl named Ronnie Garland, whose family lived in the apartment just below hers and whose parents socialized with Paul and Ann. Ronnie and Priscilla would keep each other's company while they babysat for their siblings. And the two exchanged confidences, becoming as close as Priscilla allowed herself to be with another girl. Ronnie described Priscilla's romance with Tom Stewart as really serious, and noticed a tendency to be attracted to dangerous guys. She was drawn, not to your clean-cut all-American, she was drawn to the bad ones. I would have been scared to death with Tom, she said. Like Al, she perceived Priscilla's relationship with Tommy as a sneak-around thing, with Priscilla meeting him down the street or pretending to go to a girlfriend's house so that her parents would not find out, for her father did not approve of this. Well, a girl's got needs, right? That's exactly what Priscilla was experiencing there. Maybe she was infatuated with Elvis and knew that, hey, if I get with Elvis and stay with Elvis, I'll become famous and I'll be rich. But a girl's got needs, and she was maybe used to having her needs taken care of. So once again, I go back and say, everybody's physiology, and their needs are their needs. But if you're going to pretend to be a certain way all the way up through the marriage, and you fool somebody, well, you've just manipulated them into a life that they didn't actually agree to. That's the problem I think a lot of Elvis fans have, including me. Priscilla's father, Ronnie, said her parents observed they had a double standard. I remember my dad kept saying, for him to be so strict and have so many rules, and then to let her go at such an early age and be alone with Elvis Presley. Paul B's reputation for keeping a tight rein on Priscilla due to his behavior was after Elvis left Germany, when he tried very hard to prevent Priscilla from dating anyone but Elvis. He was promoting this from the very beginning, declared Ronnie, who remembered Priscilla's father coming to the house for parties, showing off his photographs of Priscilla and Elvis, which he said were taken the night they met at a small reception the B's attended, which was his version. All right, so that's where we're going to stop, okay? Mr. B is making up a story because he wants to be famous. He wants to be important. He wants to erase the fact that this is not his daughter, in a sense. He's really trying to make his own future. And we know that Priscilla got so ticked off, she got mad and said something in front of Joe Esposito that she was mad Elvis died before he could give her father a $100,000 loan. So that $100,000 to buy the liquor store was what made her mad most. Not that Elvis had passed away, but that she couldn't milk that money cow more. That's my thoughts tonight on Child Bride. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, all right? TCBTLC, this is Rare Elvis Photos.
Lisa was the sweetest girl. Her daddy loved her so. Prissy took her to L.A., replaced Elvis with Mike Stone. Then she ran out of cash and sued the king of rock and roll. Made him sell his royalties and play show after show. She put Elvis in an early grave, then laughed upstairs at Graceland. At least that's what a witness said, when Prissy should have saved him. Instead she drank poor Elvis and took Lisa Marie away. Elvis fans, they don't forgive her to this very day. Prissy B should lose the Presley name. Now that Lisa's gone, she left us with her book, telling us all that Prissy B and Michael Edwards took. Took her joy and took her dreams, took her innocence away. And Prissy has the nerve to still get up on stage. She put Elvis in an early grave, then laughed upstairs at Graceland. At least that's what a witness said, when Prissy should have saved him. Instead she drank poor Elvis and took Lisa Marie away. Elvis fans, they don't forgive her to this very day. Prissy B should lose the Presley name. Now that Lisa's gone, she left us with her book, telling us all that Prissy B and Michael Edwards took. Took her joy and took her dreams, took her innocence away. And Prissy has the nerve to still get up on stage. She put Elvis in an early grave, then laughed upstairs at Graceland. At least that's what a witness said, when Prissy should have saved him. Instead she drank poor Elvis and took Lisa Marie away. Elvis fans, they don't forgive her to this very day. Prissy B should lose the Presley name. Prissy B should lose the Presley name.
Till tomorrow, have a wonderful evening. This is Rare Elvis Photos, or good morning to you.